Welcome to the NPC Energy Podcast. You know that feeling, right? When the world feels a little off.
hmm
Like maybe you see the same car drive past just one too many times, or a conversation feels, I don't know, weirdly scripted.
Yeah, definitely had moments like that.
We've all been there, I think. And it brings us to this really fascinating, maybe slightly mind-bending idea. What if this reality isn't quite real? Fundamentally real, I mean.
Right. What if it's running on someone else's cosmic computer, basically?
Exactly. We've touched on the simulation hypothesis before. Our whole universe is just a super complex program.
But today we're diving even deeper. We're going into a layer of this that really makes you question, well, everything. Nested simulations.
Nested simulations, okay?
Think of it like digital Russian dolls. Or that old saying, it's not turtles all the way down.
It's simulations all the way down.
Exactly. Simulations running inside other simulations, potentially creating this, infinite stack of realities.
Wow. So our universe could just be, what, one program running inside someone else's bigger simulation? Are we just characters who don't even know about the programmers? Or like other simulations running on the same cosmic server?
It's a wild thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is how this idea, which sounds pretty out there, actually connects to, serious philosophy, potential hints in physics, even sci-fi.
And those glitches in the Matrix stories people share?
Oh, look, those two, those weird little moments that make you think, did I just see a bug in the code?
Okay, so on the simulated journey, we're going to try and unpack all of that. We'll start with the philosophy behind it all.
Then look at the physics side.
Explore how pop culture got there first, maybe.
And yeah, dive into those glitch stories.
All right, buckle up. This is going to be a deep dive into, well, maybe reality itself? Or realities, plural? Let's start with the philosopher who really kicked off the modern discussion, right? Nick Bostrom.
Nick Bostrom, yeah. His 2003 paper, Are You Living in a Computer Simulation?
Hmm.
It's a really powerful argument. Doesn't definitively prove anything, but it gives you some, well, pretty unsettling possibilities to chew on.
Okay, so what's the core idea, the simulation argument?
It basically hinges on a few key steps. First, he looks at where technology seems to be heading.
Right. Computers getting faster, VR getting more real, AI getting smarter.
Exactly. He suggests that if we manage not to, blow ourselves up or something,
A big if.
a big if, yeah, humanity or any advanced civilization will eventually hit a post-human stage. Think superintelligence, maybe uploading consciousness, tech that looks like magic to us.
Okay, posthumans. Got it.
And what would these post-humans do with all that power? Bostrom suggests they might run ancestor simulations.
Ancestor simulations, like recreating the past.
Exactly. Super detailed, totally immersive simulations of people like us, their ancestors. It's kind of like how we play historical games now. But imagine the people inside are fully conscious, living their lives, no idea they're in a simulation.
Whoa. Okay.
Oh.
But could simulated people actually be conscious?
That's where substrate independence comes in. It's a key concept.
Just straight independence.
It's the idea that consciousness isn't necessarily tied to our, squishy biological brains. It's about the information processing, the patterns.
So if you can simulate the patterns perfectly,
Consciousness could, theoretically, pop up on any suitable hardware. Doesn't have to be biological. Could be silicon.
so those simulated ancestors, they could be just as aware as we are, feel just as real.
That's the argument. Their subjective experience could be indistinguishable from ours.
Okay, so let's recap. Posthumans are possible. They could run ancestor simulations, and those sims could contain conscious beings.
Right. And this leads to Bostrom's trilemma. He argues that at least one of these three possibilities must be true.
Okay, lay it on me. What are the options?
Option one is,
Well,
it's kind of grim, extinction. Humanity, or any civilization like us, just wipes itself out before reaching that post-human stage. Nuclear war, runaway AI, killer asteroid, you name it. We just don't get to the point of running simulations.
so few or no ancestor simulations ever get made. That's the doom option.
Pretty much. Option two is, maybe surprising, it's that post-human civilizations just choose not to run these simulations.
Why wouldn't they? If they could.
Maybe ethical reasons, like, is it right to create potentially suffering simulated beings? Maybe they just, evolve past caring about their history in that way.
Right.
Bostrom calls it a strong convergence. Basically, almost all advanced civilizations decide against it.
Okay, so either doom or boring ethical. What's option three?
Option three is the kicker. It's the idea that we are almost certainly living in a simulation right now.
Whoa. How does that follow?
Well, think about it. If civilizations do reach the post-human stage, and they do run lots of ancestor simulations,
Mm-hmm.
the number of simulated realities would just explode, right?
Okay.
There would be potentially billions, trillions, whatever, of simulated conscious beings living in simulated worlds compared to just one base reality where it all started.
So statistically.
Statistically, any random conscious observer, like you or me,
Mm-hmm.
is far, far more likely to be in one of the simulations than in the original base reality.
That's unsettling. So unless we're doomed or future humans are unexpectedly uninterested, the odds are we're simulated.
That's Bostrom's point. It's a statistical argument based on those assumptions. But then the nesting problem takes it even further.
Right, the simulations within simulations. So the beings running our simulation, they could be simulated too.
Exactly. Running on a computer in another simulation. It just keeps going.
It's like trying to picture infinity.
That's the nested simulation hypothesis. Layers upon layers. And think about the probabilities now.
Oh, man.
Each simulated worlds could potentially create more simulations. So the number of simulated realities doesn't just add up, it multiplies exponentially down the layers.
So if one base reality makes a million sims,
And even just say 1% of those make their own million sims,
the numbers get astronomical really, really fast.
compared to just one potential base reality.
Mm-hmm.
So the chance of you being in that original one shrinks incredibly quickly the more layers you imagine.
So the deeper it goes, the less likely we are to be numero uno. It's a probability bomb, assuming nesting is even possible.
Right. Assuming it's feasible. It's like virtual machines inside virtual machines, but, with whole universes.
Can the universe even support that, though? Can physics handle stacking realities? Are there clues?
That's the next big question, isn't it? If we're in a simulation, are there artifacts, glitches, limitations in the code?
Like looking for bugs in the Matrix. Or
Yeah.
seeing the limits of the game engine.
Exactly. One idea people talk about is lazy rendering.
Like in video games,
Mm.
where it only renders what you're looking at.
Sort of, yeah. To save processing power.
Mm.
Some wonder if reality does that. Think about the observer effect in quantum mechanics, where just looking at a particle seems to change its state.
People link that to simulation theory.
Some do. Physicist Tom Campbell, for instance, has proposed experiments trying to test if reality is fundamentally participatory. Like, does conscious observation actually bring details into existence? Which could, maybe, be a sign of an optimized simulation saving resources.
Interesting. Cool.
Then there's the idea of, pixels. A fundamental resolution to reality itself.
You mean space and time aren't smooth, but broken into tiny bits?
Possibly. Quantum physics says energy comes in discrete packets, quanta. Maybe space and time are quantized too.
Mm-hmm.
Down to the Planck length, which is incredibly tiny. Could that be the pixel size of our simulation?
Has anyone looked for that?
There was an experiment proposed back in 2012 by Silas Bean and colleagues. They thought if space was a grid, like a lattice,
Mm-hmm.
then really high-energy cosmic rays might not travel equally easily in all directions. They'd sort of bump into the grid structure, creating a specific pattern and anisotropy in how they arrive here.
Did they find it, this cosmic ray grid pattern?
Well, cosmic ray patterns are complex, but they haven't found that specific kind of anisotropy they predicted. Not yet, anyway. Maybe the grid is just too fine for us to see with today's tech.
Okay. Any other physics hints?
There's the Bacon-Stein bound. It's a concept from physics, suggesting there's a maximum amount of information you can pack into a given region of space with a certain amount of energy.
A limit on information density.
Yeah. Which kind of makes you wonder, could that be a limit imposed by the simulation's hard drive? The capacity of the computer running our universe?
Huh. That's a cool thought.
It is, but it's a bit of a double-edged sword. Some physicists argue that this very limit makes simulating our universe incredibly hard because you'd need to track such a massive amount of information, so it cuts both ways.
Right. And there are other big challenges too, aren't there? Especially for the whole nested idea. Physics and computation seem to throw up some roadblocks.
Absolutely. A huge one is just the sheer complexity overload.
Simulating our universe is hard.
Unbelievably hard. Think about all the quantum stuff, the details of space-time, every particle interaction. Even for hypothetical, super-advanced beings, accurately simulating it might be fundamentally impossible.
Sabine Hossenfelder talks about this, right?
Yeah, she's a prominent critic. She points out that simulation proponents often just kind of wave their hands at these massive computational hurdles without explaining how they'd actually be overcome. You can't just ignore the fundamental physics at the smallest scales.
Because it affects everything else.
Exactly. It all ripples upwards. Then there's computational irreducibility.
That's Stephen Wolfram's idea.
Mostly associated with them, yeah. It suggests that for many complex systems, maybe including our universe, the only way to know what happens next is to actually run the simulation step by step.
No shortcuts, no magic formula to predict the future.
Pretty much. If that's true for our universe, then running detailed ancestor simulations or any sim trying to predict stuff becomes super inefficient, maybe even pointless. Why run a slow copy when you have the real thing?
Okay, that makes sense. And for nested sims.
That's where you hit the resource drain apocalypse.
Sounds bad.
Well, think about it. Each simulation layer needs resources from the layer above it, right? Energy, processing power, memory. If you have sims within sims within sims, doesn't the total demand just skyrocket? How could the original base reality computer possibly handle running Universe A, which is running Universe B, which is running Universe C, potentially forever?
Yeah, where does all the power and memory come from? It seems like you'd run out of cosmic RAM pretty quickly.
Exactly. People try to argue maybe nested sims run on their own internal simulated resources, but...
That sounds like trying to power a real lamp with a picture of a battery.
Right. It doesn't seem logical. Or they talk about extreme optimization, like only rendering observed stuff. But critics like Hassenfelder argue it's hard to see how you could do that perfectly without creating obvious inconsistencies or paradoxes. Infinite simulations on finite resources feels like a basic contradiction.
So physics gives some maybe hints, but also some really big hang-on-a-minute problems, especially for nesting.
Yeah. It reminds us that just because an idea is philosophically neat doesn't automatically mean it works in reality. Or, simulated reality.
Okay, enough brain-melting physics for a bit. Let's switch gears. Let's talk about science fiction and video games, because it feels like they were playing with these simulation ideas way before it was mainstream academic discussion.
Oh, absolutely. Forget the equations for a minute. Sci-fi writers, game designers, they've been grappling with simulated worlds for decades, and often exploring the nested idea in really cool ways.
The Matrix, obviously.
Right.
1999, that just blew the lid off for a lot of people.
Totally. Gave us the red pill, blue pill, the glitches, this iconic image of humanity unknowingly trapped in a simulation run by machines. Perfect illustration of Bostrom's idea, really.
But it's mostly about escaping that one layer, right? It doesn't really dig into the idea that the real world they escape to might also be fake.
Exactly. The Matrix set the stage. But for explicitly nested sims on screen, you got to look at the 13th floor. Also 1999, strangely enough.
The 13th floor, I remember that one.
It goes way further. The main character finds out his own world, late 90s LA, is actually a simulation run from the year 2024.
Whoa!
And then he finds out that within their 2024 simulation, they built a simulation of 1937 LA. It's layers being peeled back, simulations within simulations.
And that wasn't even the first time, you're saying?
Nope. It was based on a novel from way back in 1964 called Simulacron 3.
64? Wow.
Yeah, by Daniel F. Gillespie. Explored very similar ideas, and that novel inspired a German TV series in '73 called World on a Wire. So this nesting idea has been kicking around fiction for a long, long time, exploring the paranoia, the uncertainty.
What do those older ones get at?
It's that existential dread. Not just, oh no, my world isn't real, but the terror that the world you think you escaped to might also be fake. That there's no bottom, no solid ground. That feeling of being controlled from above, layer by layer.
Yeah, that's heavy. Then you've got Inception. Different mechanism, dreams, not computers, but same feeling.
Totally. Dreams within dreams, the time dilation between layers, the constant, is this real, ambiguity. It maps perfectly onto the logic and the disorientation of nested simulations.
And we got to mention Rick and Morty, the M. Night Shyamalan's.
Brilliant, pure comedic gold, but playing with exactly this. Rick and Jerry trapped in simulation after simulation.
By those alien scammers.
Right. And Rick keeps figuring it out, escaping, only to find himself in another, slightly better sim. It just nails the tropes, spotting the glitches, the feeling you can never be sure you're out.
And that fan theory that they're still in one at the end, perfect paranoia fuel.
Absolutely. And let's dip into game lore for a second.
Yeah.
The Elder Scrolls.
Oh, yeah. What's the connection?
The deep lore has this concept called CHI, C-H-I-M.
Okay.
It's basically a state of enlightenment where a character realizes the entire universe, the whole game world, is essentially the dream of this cosmic entity called the Godhead.
So realizing you're in the simulation, basically.
Exactly. And the catch is, most who realize this cease to exist.
Yeah.
They're zero-sum, can't handle being fictional.
But some don't.
Those who achieve CHI manage to hold on to their identity while knowing the truth. And they gain power, the ability to manipulate the dream, the simulation, like getting admin privileges or console commands in the game. Vivek is the big example in the lore.
Huh. So it's exploring awareness within the simulation.
Yeah, and what that might mean. It's fascinating. Even simpler games like The Sims or SimCity.
Where you're the god.
Yeah. As you're controlling these little digital people, doesn't it make you pause for a second and think, what if someone's doing this to us?
Definitely crosses your mind.
So pop culture is like this amazing philosophical sandbox, isn't it? These stories make these abstract ideas about nested realities feel tangible, emotional. They give us metaphors to even think about it.
It's like a feedback loop. Philosophy asks the questions, pop culture helps us imagine the answers, or at least feel the weight of them.
Precisely. Maybe spending time with these stories gives us a different kind of understanding than just the physics or philosophy alone.
Agreed. Okay, so speaking of things that make you question reality, what about those stories people tell? The glitches in the Matrix? Could those be actual evidence? Cracks in the code?
Ah, yes, the anecdotal evidence. This stuff is all over the internet, right?
For sure. Places like Reddit are glitch in the Matrix, RAWIS. They're just filled with personal stories of weirdness. Reality hiccups, basically.
Intense déjà vu, objects vanishing or appearing, people acting weirdly repetitive, like NPCs.
Yeah, the NPC behavior thing. Let's talk about the specific stories first, though. There are some classics.
Like the glitchy husband story, where the woman gets texts from her husband's phone while he's asleep next to her.
Right, and the texts have details he shouldn't know, like pet names, and then later, no record on his phone.
Super weird. What is that? Cross wires from another sim, a system bug.
Or the kitchen light paradox. Two people in the same room. One sees the light on, the other sees it off simultaneously. And one even has a photo showing it off, but the other knows they saw it on.
Did one of them just desync for a second? A local rendering error. It's bizarre.
And there are so many others, people reporting near-death experiences where they feel like they crossed over but got yanked back.
Seeing exact doubles, doppelgangers, of people who are definitely somewhere else.
Impossible coincidences, missing time, roads that just lead nowhere or loop back.
It's a whole catalog of strangeness.
And then the NPC behavior you mentioned, people acting robotic.
Yeah, like stuck in a loop, saying the same phrase over and over, walking into walls, being totally oblivious. That Stardew Valley example is perfect. The shopkeeper saying it's his day off while he's literally standing there working.
Is it just people being absent-minded, zoned out? Or are we seeing the background programming bleed through, the scripts running the non-player characters in our reality?
But that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Are these real glitches, actual flaws in the simulation's code?
Or is it just our brains doing what brains do? Finding patterns, making connections, misremembering things, pareidolia, confirmation bias?
Exactly. Our minds are really good at creating stories to explain weird stuff. These accounts are fascinating. They tap into that uncanny feeling, but they're still anecdotes.
Turning a weird coincidence into proof of nested simulations is a massive leap. There's usually a more mundane explanation, even if it's less fun.
Yeah. And if we were in nested simulations, wouldn't the glitches be even weirder, maybe multi-layered? Could a bug way up the stack cause strange effects down here?
What about the Mandela effect, that shared false memory thing? Could that be like the simulator's restoring from a backup after a crash and some details get changed?
Or maybe the glitches are deliberate interventions we just don't understand. Who knows?
So the stories are compelling. They show how much the simulation idea resonates, but yeah, not exactly hard evidence. Still fun to think about, though.
Definitely. Let's play devil's advocate. Let's assume for a minute it's true. We are in a nested simulation.
What does that actually mean for us? What are the implications?
Okay, yeah. Big picture time. Let's start with free will. If it's all programmed, do we have any?
That's a huge one. Are our choices real or just following the script? Maybe there's genuine randomness built in, like quantum mechanics suggests, and that's where freedom comes from? Or is it all just a really convincing illusion?
And if we're nested deep down, does our free will get, like, diluted with each layer? Less real?
Maybe. And what about consciousness itself? Is simulated consciousness the same as biological? Does it feel the same?
Are some people real players from above and others just sophisticated NPCs, like in Westworld or something?
Could be. Does consciousness get less rich, less detailed, the deeper you go in the nesting? That's the philosophical nesting problem for consciousness. How does it even arise in systems within systems?
Then there's purpose. Why? Why build all this layer upon layer? Good question. Was it ancestor simulation? Just entertainment. A giant science experiment trying to predict something.
Or are we just, like, an accident? A side effect of some other simulation running? Maybe we're just background noise in someone else's experiment.
And does the original purpose even matter down at our level? Maybe it got lost layers ago.
Ethics gets messy too, right? If simulated beings can suffer.
Is it moral to create them?
Yeah.
And if we might be simulated, does that mean we have a responsibility not to create suffering sims ourselves if we ever get the tech? Do normal ethics even apply inside a simulation?
And could we interact between layers? Hack our way out? Contact the simulators?
Sci-fi loves that idea. But the layers might be totally sealed. And if it sims all the way down,
Yeah.
who would we even contact? There might not be an ultimate creator.
Which brings us to the biggest question, maybe. Does it even matter?
Right. If this reality is all we know, does finding out it's simulated change anything about how we should live?
Some people say no. Our experiences are real to us. Find meaning here, in this layer.
Others might fall into nihilism. If it's all just code, does anything truly matter?
Yeah. Oh, that's a lot. Deep stuff. But let's pull back again. There are strong arguments against this whole nested simulation idea, too. Reasons to be skeptical.
Definitely. We should cover those. We already talked about the huge computational limits.
Simulating even one universe seems crazy hard. Multiple layers. Maybe impossible due to resource needs.
Right. And the unfalsifiability problem. How do you prove or disprove it? Any test could just be part of the simulation. It makes it kind of unscientific, doesn't it?
Yeah, if you can't test it. And the self-defeating argument.
Which is?
Well, the whole simulation hypothesis is built using our science, our logic, developed within this reality. If this reality is fake, then the tools we use to build the hypothesis are potentially unreliable, too.
Good point. It sort of eats its own tail. And then there's Occam's razor.
The simplest explanation is best.
Usually. Isn't we live in the one base reality?
Yeah.
Simpler than we live in simulation, hashtag 7,534, nested inside 7,533 others. The nested idea adds complexity without clear evidence.
We also have to question Bostrom's starting points, right? Is consciousness really substrate independent? Are the probabilities calculated correctly? Would post-humans really want to run ancestor sims?
All fair questions. And finally, maybe the stability paradox.
Meaning.
If we were deep inside a nested system, wouldn't it be more fragile? More prone to glitches, crashes, weird interactions between layers? Our reality seems pretty consistent, mostly. The laws of physics don't break down on a Tuesday.
True. While we get weird anecdotes, the overall structure seems remarkably stable. The stability argues against being in a rickety, multi-layered simulation.
So yeah, while nested simulations are fascinating to think about, there are some serious scientific and philosophical hurdles. It's a great what if, but maybe not the most likely scenario.
Okay, so after this whole simulated journey through nested realities, where does that leave us?
Still wondering, I guess. The truth is, we just don't know. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's part of the human condition.
We've definitely looked at a lot. The philosophy, the physics hints, the sci-fi visions, the glitchy stories. The idea of simulations all the way down really does make your head spin.
But we also saw the big problems. The computational challenges. The fact it might be impossible to prove, the lack of solid evidence.
Yeah.
But whether we're base reality or sim, hashtag 10 billion, the questions it forces us to ask about who we are, what's real, if we have free will, those are valuable questions.
Absolutely. So listeners of NPC Energy, what do you think? Are we living in a nested simulation? We'd love to hear your theories, your thoughts, any weird glitches you've experienced.
Yeah, share them with us. Use the hashtag NPC Energy.
Until next time, keep questioning everything. Keep looking closely.
And maybe, just maybe, you'll spot a crack in the code.
Stay curious.